So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the March 2024 Indicators of Behavior Subproject meeting as part of the Open Cybersecurity Alliance. I am your chair and host, Charlie Frick from Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. This month, wanted to just start off with a quick reminder on logistics that after this meeting, we'll be transitioning to every 3 months for the calls. We're still doing a lot of work, but as far as the monthly technical updates, we thought it could be we could better serve everyone by maintaining the conversation in the Slack and providing more combined updates of our development. And once we in a little bit less frequent time frame, they'll give us more time to build and have more IOB content to demonstrate. So I appreciate everyone's understanding, and we will keep things going. Just didn't want anybody to think we are by no means slowing down our research and application of behaviors. It's just as some of the more tasking comes in, we think it'll be better. We'll be able to have higher quality data to show you by going every 3 months rather than show you all of our rough drafts every month. Today, also, unfortunately, you guys are stuck with me for your technical content for the monthly update. What I'm going to do today is twofold. I'm going to take everybody through the current draft of our revision 3 of the indicator of behavior reference implementation. We are working on cleaning up the final bit of documentation on that on our end and pushing it through our public release process with both the laboratory and with CISA to get all of that approved to be shared up on the GitHub. But today I thought I'd give everyone a preview mostly of some of the elements that have changed and just kind of recap into that part and answer any questions folks might have on the overall structure of IOB. Then I'd like to pivot a little bit and give everyone a little bit of a preview of some of our plans for the CASP Cybersecurity Automation Village Plugfest that will be occurring on April 11th and 12th next month. And we'll be supporting that with a lot of work with some of the other open projects, both within OCA and other parts of OASIS as well. Before I dive into it, just wanted to check for a moment and see if anybody had some overarching comments or concerns. Otherwise, we can address those during an open discussion towards the later half of the meeting. Alrighty then. So I'll start off with giving an overview of our revision 3. Now, for those of you anybody that might not have caught some of our earlier meetings, the indicator of behavior construct is a customized STIX, Structured Threat Information Exchange, JSON formatted bundle of cyber threat intelligence that's really meant to share, beyond indicators of compromise and beyond the TTPs that we currently share. We've been looking at how to translate various campaigns that have been observed in the wild into patterns of observable behavior. That's a little layer deeper than the tactics and techniques you'll see in an attack pattern, but a lot more reusable than traditional indicators of compromise. And we often share those behaviors, detection analytics, as well as correlation workflows in machine readable formats so that they can be processed by automation. As you look at STIX, it really becomes a knowledge graph. And so towards that, for a lot of our research efforts here at the laboratory, we've been converting the STIX JSON objects into Neo4j graph databases because that's allowed us to do a lot of rapid analysis and visualization of the different types of relationships. And so today, I'm going to show some examples of those graphs using the Python converter that we host on the Indicator of Behavior GitHub site. So allow me to get my screen shared and then find all my Zoom windows as soon as I start that. and happy to answer questions. I'm also going to try and pull up the participant list in the chat so I can see if anybody has their hand up. And feel free, if you're so inclined, do not hesitate to interrupt me if you have questions about anything that I'm saying. So hopefully I can get some confirmation that everyone sees a bunch of pretty dots on a blank canvas right now. And I've got confirmation. So this is the Bloom graph visualizer from Neo4j. If we need to, in a moment, I can bring up the traditional Neo4j browser if we want to do some more complex querying. But what I've done today is taken our reference implementation and pared it down just for a little part that can help me talk you guys through the overall construct and where we've made some of our big changes. So let me zoom in a little. And what you'll see here is a visualization of our traditional Reaper Lite campaign. So Reaper's the scenario that we've been using for our reference implementations. I will share with the group that we have, and I'll talk more on the CASP part of this technical brief, but for CASP, we've been building a behavior bundle based off the Olympic Destroyer campaign. And I will say, for those interested in our research for CISA, Kurt and I and others are currently working on an IOB representation for a campaign known as Volt Typhoon that targets critical infrastructure. But since we've been using Reaper for the previous reference implementations, we wanted to include that. As we build the other ones, we will be working on and get the public release. We'll make sure to have those shared as further examples on our GitHub site so that everyone can have a copy. But to start off with, for the Reaper campaign, let me talk you through some of what you're seeing here is we have our chains of behaviors. So we have and you can double click and read a little bit more detail in any particular one. But here is for mail clients opening browsers and browsers downloading a macro-enabled Office document. We keep the relation back to MITRE ATT&CK for the attack patterns. And we're actually using the enterprise attack sticks objects from MITRE's GitHub repository. So if one is interested in the observed TTPs, or really TTs, you can pull up and get the full entry from enterprise attack from MITRE, and all that lovely data is available right here. But as we've said many times, these are often operating at a higher level that often makes it difficult for one to translate the behavior straight into a detection. And so we'll have detections, and I'll get towards those again in a moment. But just as a quick recap, we have a chain of observed behaviors to represent a campaign. Now, as we've had discourse in other meetings, we're using an example of sharing ways to detect a set of adversary activities. There are other constructs that we are currently researching on how to capture smaller sets of observable behaviors to help just find anomalous activity and launch response. But we do have essentially a mail client opening a browser downloading a macro-enabled Office document, that macro-enabled Office document launching new processes, those processes modifying the registry for persistence, but also installing a Cobalt Strike beacon that begins a command and control session to a C2 server. And we then observe on the initial target some evidence of privilege escalation. In the Reaper campaign, essentially, it's a user-level process that spawns a system-level process. And that system-level process is the malware continuing to go through the kill chain. And from there, we observed something known as DC sync activity and Kerberoasting in order to create what's known as a golden ticket, a way to create some persistent credentials across the network, followed by some anomalous network traffic that indicate lateral movement, which finishes with data exfiltration. And as I said, we'll maintain the links to MITRE ATT&CK, so one can, for any one piece of this, you can absolutely read through the full attack entry and have access to that. More importantly, those can be some of the common pivot points between campaigns that we represent. But the goal here is that we'll be able to share correlation logic and detections that persist across multiple campaigns and aren't so tightly tuned to one specific threat actor at one specific moment in time. But as I wanted to showcase all the elements of the revision 3 reference implementation, I thought I'd take a moment and kind of just show you these snippets of all the data. And so the nice thing about STIX is it identifies objects and relationships. And so that's how we're able to capture some of these things about like the sequencing, as well as keep these unique types of relationships to things like the attack patterns. Additionally, while we don't see many defenders immediately needing this, we wanted to make sure that the standard had a way to represent the evidence that we used to create our detection rules. And so there are observed data objects. I'm just showing a subset of the full bundle here, but to give you an idea, this is showing observed data from the different behaviors. In this case, it is a chain of process elements that we saw spawned in the environment during the attack. And you can kind of share the observables of this process that was launching a command shell was spawned by this process in Word, spawned by the download in Chrome, which was spawned by the activity in Outlook in this particular example. And so we still maintain the ability to have all that. Using the observed data objects made it a little bit more compliant with some of our friends over in StickShifter, and that's why we went that route. But as I said, additionally, each behavior is tied to a detection rule. Now, these are encoded in base 64 format. In this example, we're still using Sigma, but if one wanted to see that rule, I meant to bring up the other browser for this purpose. I'll only take a moment. I'll up the traditional Neo4j browser. The demo gods are angry at me. There we go. And I believe I've got this query saved. Well, called it CASP on there, but and I do have a small typo I need to fix, but that's easy enough. And executing that query, I can decode that base 64. So say for the spear phishing one, here you'll see the Sigma rule that can then be automatically translated to multiple seams or other types of search that you might want to do to find that activity. And we'll talk more about correlations in a second. Obviously, this is an alert that would let you know every single time a email client on any end user system launched a web browser. That you can imagine that could be several million of those alerts per day. This is not intended for a human to look at. This is an alert meant for a computer to look at and only bring it to a human's attention once we have successful correlation. And I'll talk about those correlation workflows in a moment. But now, as a bit of a review, some of this is from revision 2, but I want to make sure we recap before I get into the main changes, is each detection, hopefully I can, there we go, also maintains relationships or has the ability to maintain relationships to a detector object. This is where in the machine readable format, we describe the tools that we're using to represent that detection or to generate that detection. Here we're using Sigma. And so this gives a breakdown of the type of data that we feed it, what types of detections it conducts. This is Sigma is for representing log files, as well as links to the URL and our best attempt at a CPE enumeration for the software. And along with the detector, it will let you know what data sources and data components are being used. We are leveraging MITRE's repo for those very heavily, but gives you an idea of, in this example, it's looking at process creation data, Windows registry data, as well as network share access data are the types of logs the overall campaign is using. Sigma has a relationship to many of the detections, but just to simplify the view for the moment, I'm just showing you guys the one micro case inside the reference implementation. Pausing for a second. If there are questions, feel free to voice them. Otherwise, I'll move on and then we'll talk a little bit about CASP. Okay. Now, one of the big changes that we've done has to do with the correlations. So in previous revisions of the IOB reference implementation, we used to have something we called a detection group object, which was a unique custom sticks object to hold the correlation logic for correlating these alerts, because the correlations are kind of the key part, that while every single one of those detections you see on the screen most likely has a very high false positive rate, what we've seen in our research, as well as additional pilots and experiments, is that correlating fields between these alerts tends to have a very low false positive rate and tends to be quite effective at finding some techniques that currently we haven't been so successful with when all we have to detect are indicators of compromise. And so we still want to share those correlation workflows, but since we got started on all of this journey, our good friends in Kakao have made some great progress with a playbook extension. And after firm review, we kind of realized that while we started with a detection group object, talking with some other members of the projects, we got a lot of feedback that maybe we don't need a custom object for that, because a correlation workflow is essentially a playbook. And so we listened. And now we're just using a standard sticks grouping object to represent the detections. The entire bundle is also a group. But within that grouping is a group of detections. And where we provide a detection correlation context for the group to help identify what its purpose in life is. And that has a relationship to a course of action sticks domain object for correlating and scoring behaviors. And that's where one can see. And of course, it froze. So, but that's where we'll have our correlation playbook, hopefully. There we go. To help explain the purpose of the workflow. Again, we do the base 64 trick to embed the entire Kakao playbook. And we could, while we're doing Kakao here, we can support other formats. In CASP next month, we'll be showing the same idea with Kestrel hunt books. And similarly, as we've shown before, a big reason why we liked the Neo4j is it allows us to rapidly query and convert those base 64 objects into playbooks that we could then copy out of here, or more realistically, we would be using automation to pipe that straight into a tool like Kakao Roaster, where you could then visualize the the workflow. And we will, this is still, for full disclosure, this is being cleaned up as we speak. So the reference implementation will have one that loads a little bit nicer into Cacao Roaster with all the pretty coordinate layout objects that you'd like to have. And we're working on that right now. Additionally, you'll see adding a new type of relationship for a course of action triggering another course of action. So this correlation, once you've correlated and identified a threat, we're going to trigger a response. In the current structure, we're utilizing the Stix note object to store the workflow itself. One could read and interpret what makes it trigger conducting response. But we also wanted to have a quick reference of describing the trigger embedded as a note object attached to the course of action. And so that's a big thing that we're doing right now in revision 3. Similarly, that starts a mitigation workflow, and which could trigger quarantine and remediation, another embedded Cacao workflow, which you can view by looking at the playbook objects and translating the base 64 out and getting a nice workflow. Also, from some of our reviews with some of the other projects, folks wanted to see how one could take advantage of the OCA asset extension. So we do have a sample of that right now for a taxi server that played a role in the mitigation workflow. Now, that's just, as I said, I know it might seem a little boring, but cleaning up that logic and testing it out is a big part of what we've been focused on for this revision, as well as some of our other research into reading these files into various tips and capturing some of that and preparing for things like CASP. I wanted just to take a moment before I transition over to talking about our activities for CASP and see, did anybody have any questions on revision 3? Silence. Oh, yes, go ahead, Jane.
Yeah, you mentioned that you're working on a Volt Typhoon use case. Are you going to build it out in version 3 of your reference implementation?
I'm not going to. We're going to release it once we have it, but it'll probably be a little bit later than revision 3. So we thought instead of waiting, we'll get this version out there as we clean up the Volt Typhoon. We'll just kind of add that as an additional example, but not as the official release of IOB. It'll be in the revision 3 format, though.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, absolutely.
So Charlie, can you zoom on those mitigation dots again?
Sure. Absolutely.
So when you mitigate and make changes, shouldn't Reaper light detections be notified that there's a change?
So you're thinking like dynamically updating the detection logic once the mitigation's put in place?
Or it should go back to the correlate. So something, I think, it's like verification of action, did this work? So I don't. Go ahead.
Some of those steps are in the workflow itself.
Okay.
Right now.
So, but I think that I'm just interested in the arrows. So the idea to mitigate the incident, if you could consider the notion that there might be a message that goes back to correlation and scoring behaviors so that they know that whatever it is that they saw should either go away or go up or go down or not occur ever again.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
That's why we have these meetings, Carter. Thank you for that feedback. And I just want to take a moment to jot that down so I actually have it in the minutes and get it on our work plan.
Yeah, so if I see that there's a problem and I trigger it, mitigation doesn't do anything about it. You probably should revert the mitigation rather than go into another mitigation and another mitigation and another mitigation. So how does correlation scoring come to understand those conditions have changed? That, hey, that didn't work, they've changed this, something new has happened, and he can't, even yet another mitigation has occurred. So I just think correlation and scoring needs to know about that.
Okay, thank you. Any other things, Carter?
Oh, no, it looks good.
Okay, just wanted to check. Anybody else?
It
Okay.
looks like Matthias put something in chat.
Yes, I knew Mateus was going to catch that.
Yeah.
I was zipping by. I had a very, very old draft Cacao playbook in that base 64 I didn't update. But you are correct. The dollar signs need to be underscores. And that's part of the joy that I'm giving Kurt, right? That Kurt's been working on. That will be fixed. I figured if Mateus or Vasilios were here, they would be the first people to catch that one. I think also my example might be Cacao version 1, but version 2 is what we're going to insert in there. This is just the local Neo4j I keep on inside my laptop so that I don't break the versions of the bundle that we keep on GitHub and the server that we're sharing. And of course, because the graphs are fun, I'll quickly show you guys. So this was what I filtered down to, but the bundle in its entirety, we'll expand out a little. I think we have is a whole lot of data that breaks out into all sorts of categories, including making sure that we give good reference to our contributors of the OCA, and also making sure we attribute the things that we took from MITRE's repo. We are using their Stix identity object to make sure that we properly reference where we got stuff from. And anyone that's spent a lot of time in graphs knows, like, hey, I can quickly do these hierarchical and force-directed layouts, but it does get a little tricky to actually understand what the heck you're reading. And I cannot at all get this back to the layout that I had before we started without a good bit of manual work. And so I won't be doing that. But I just wanted to let you guys know we have a whole lot of stuff. It is, again, still all in Stix 2.1. Works great with a taxi server that's adhering to the standard. Part of what will, and I'm kind of crossing both topics I wanted to address today, but part of what we'll be showing ideally during the CAS Plug Fest is, as one would expect, you submit that Stix bundle you put it into a taxi envelope, and you can add it to a taxi server, you can pull it from a taxi server and provide updates. All of that works fine. That said, the implementation of taxi integrations on various threat intel platforms, mileage varies by vendor of what objects they currently accept. And a big part of why we do these reference implementations and events like CASP is to make the case for full support of the standard as well as the extensions so that your user base has an opportunity to take advantage of this data. Because while we can send it very quickly, it's not much use if the products that your SOC is using never see it because it was stripped out upon import. So that's part of what we are working on for CASP this year. And I don't have a demo to show you guys on CASP yet because I'm still writing the indicator behavior objects. So you'll get mostly my verbal track and my CRIB notes that I've that I'm working on right now. Apologies if they're not quite ready for prime time yet, but we're a month out. And so by then they will be. But what I wanted to let you guys know is what we've been doing for CASP is the whole CASP project decided that we would be using the 2018 Olympic Destroyer campaign, for example. Jane did a fantastic job putting together a threat intel report for us. And then several of the members provided indicators and sticks bundles that they were able to generate from some of their tools. And what IOB has done is we are going to first provide a overview of the threat narrative for the Plugfest members in the morning. But additionally, we read through that report and we built a small toy enterprise network in our lab environment and recreated several of the steps using Metasploit to step through many of those same TTPs to create an example of the attack, because at the same time, we had configured a Elasticsearch SIEM stack that was ingesting Sysmon logs as well as NetFlow records from automatically generated by the switch. And we shared those logs through the CASP on the CASP GitHub as well as through the CASP Slack so that other teams could start devising threat hunt analytics and response workflows relevant to the threat. And so we emulated the attack, we've got the logs. The Kestrel team has been building out some threat hunt playbooks that we've been reviewing. That's kind of the correlation of multiple alerts. The individual detections are in stick shifter format. And so the IOB bundle that we are building for CASP will include the MITRE ATT&CK TTPs, the behavior objects, detections in stick shifter format, correlation of detections in a Kestrel hunt book that then trigger a response action represented as a Cacao playbook. And then the goal for our demo, we only have about half an hour total for it, but we'll give a very, very super brief overview of the IOB object. Many of the people here have seen that talk a few times. This will be the one slide version of that. Talk about the process we use to build the Olympic Destroyer IOB bundle, and then show us pulling it from a taxi server, utilizing the Neo4j script to load it up into a graph database so we could rapidly query it and do that conversion I just showed you, how to extract out the Kestrel hunt book, save that to a file, show it loading up in Kestrel. Also show us export the Cacao playbook, load that up in Roaster. We also are hoping to have time to make a change in Roaster, save a new version of the playbook, and then use the Sticks modeler that we demonstrated last month to update the bundle. And time permitting, submit it up to the taxi server that we pulled it from, just kind of highlighting rapidly how we're able to use all these different components fairly easily because we all adhered to open standards and made our tools available to one another, kind of the overall theme. And essentially using the IOB as a Swiss Army knife or a Swiss Army bucket, I guess, to hold all the different types of data and our different standards. And I don't think that the Cacao playbook I'll be embedding has OpenC2 commands in it yet, but we can be flexible and hopefully put one of those in too if we get the opportunity. And that's a really big picture, hand-wavy description of what we've been working on, but that's what we're hoping to be able to showcase at CASP to really help drive the point home, and then hand the baton off to some of the other projects as they show us how they turn the data that we're sharing into action on a network environment. So are there any questions on that front related to the plans for CASP? Seems like we're all good. Fantastic. Oh, Patrick, did you have something?
Just a comment, thank you very much for you and your team's efforts. It's really much appreciated.
Oh, absolutely. Sorry, we didn't have time to get the attack all packaged up into a Caldera module. Good tool. It's just we were running behind on time, so it was faster for us just to fire off the Metasploit, which
Yep,
surprisingly,
and I'm
go ahead.
yeah, I'm still working on trying to get someone to donate the Interoperability Village to us. So
Understood.
for the next
I'll
one.
have a lot of it running on my laptop, but if we do have a server, I can move the stuff over pretty quick.
I guess I could put my Mac Studio with 128 gig of RAM in a suitcase and bring it with me. We could set up our own lab.
Oh, that's a
The heck with it, right? What do we need the cloud for? Anyway, thanks again, Charles. Good stuff.
you're reminding me of an event where I might have hauled in a Nutanix stack by hand and set it on a coffee table. But we do what we got to do. But thank you, Patrick.
Well, I got a drawer full of Raspberry Pis. I got 10 or
And
12 Raspberry Pis. I could bring them down too. There you go.
Love it. And I felt a little bit like we were cheating with Metasploit, but as I did read through all the threat intel reports, it was a little depressing to see that really a lot of the threat actor and Olympic Destroyer was using default Metasploit interpreter payloads on port 4444 and being very successful, which is literally what, for those that don't do a lot of ethical hacking, that is literally what you would do if you were copying what you watched on a YouTube video on how to use Metasploit, which they may have been doing.
I watched one of the most sophisticated Chinese threat actors use this rudimentary, simple thing that had been successful for them 2 years before. They use it again 2 years later in the finance industry, and it did not change one, not even an IP address or domain. They use the same attack, the same command and control, the same. So the bottom line is, if it works, they'll use it.
Yep, exactly. So those were the main things I wanted to make sure I got across to everyone this month before the Plug Fest started. We do have a little bit of time left for open discussion, and happy to entertain any concerns, topics that anybody had for the work we're doing, for the group in general. Always happy to hear people out and make sure we capture your needs and help come up to resolutions if there's any problems. So that said, open mic. If anybody has something they'd like to discuss, I'm all ears.
So Charlie, for the next meeting is 3 months from now? Are we
Yes.
thinking about an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours?
I'll probably have to keep it to an hour, but I'll also try to build a lot more meat into the technical talk and package it up a little better so we can hit the high points.
But come to you for topics?
Absolutely. If you have things that you want to have included on the agenda, always feel free to reach out to me via the listserv, the Slack, or my email, and I'll always happy to put that in the chat. I know you know it, Carter, but for anybody else, yes, if you have topics you want to make sure are included, I'm always happy to fold things into the agenda. And if we do
Cool.
get to a point where we feel we have way too much and to cover and that every 3 months is not enough, we can revisit the calendar adjustment.
Cool.
But I
Okay,
knew
thanks.
I was kind of scraping to get us a monthly update on everything and build the things that I wanted to update us on. So that was a big reason for a change in the schedule.
Cool.
All righty. And anyone else?
So Charlie, you mentioned that you would like to build in some interface with OpenC2. David is on the call and I think has been working with his team on the threat hunting actuator profile. And I'm wondering if you all had a chance to coordinate on that.
David and I have not coordinated directly. I've been spying on your conversations on the Slack. And basically I was trying not to get in the way, because my thought is, as some of the work you've been doing, and I think there was a Cal playbook to launch Kestrel. And so I was going to kind of watch that closely and see about maybe even on the week of the Plug Fest, once we've gotten our products released into the Sweat Equity folder, seeing if we could do some manipulation of the publicly released data and rapidly build a prototype to embed that stuff. Because adding the new playbooks, I mean, once the playbook is made, pretty much I need to base 64 encode it into a string and pop it inside a JSON. And so that only takes a couple minutes on our end.
That sounds like a perfectly reasonable approach. We have a couple things going on at the moment. Kevin has been fine-tuning some aspects of the thread hunting AP schema, and we have a meeting with Kestrel in a couple hours, in fact, to go over what our changes are and kind of status synchronize with them on where things act with them. We've already done a little comms testing in the last week, and that actually worked, which is always encouraging. So on the one hand, we'd very much like to see OpenC2 integrated into Kakao. On the other hand, we're still building our understanding of what that means. And since we don't have and don't know of any currently available Kakao execution platforms that follow the 2.0 spec, it's kind of a tough nut to crack to actually do something with it.
I absolutely understand. I do think there's some developments underway to help change that, but nothing that I know of that's allowed for announcement yet. But
I also posted a couple of issues to the Kakao, the Kakao GitHub repo, not the roaster, but the actual Kakao repo, relating to things like the fact that, if we view OpenC2 as implementing the result of the deciding step of the IACD OODA loop, that's a very dynamic thing, right? And how do you inject that dynamic thing into the Kakao playbook just prior to the execution is one of the things I'm still scratching my head about.
I understand. It's some of the stuff we're playing with in some of our security orchestration research that complements all this IOB work. I don't talk about that side much, but yeah, there's obviously a heavy connection for why we want to send all this type of data at such a fast speed, is to rapidly translate it into the orchestration platforms.
But yeah, in the meantime, we'd be more than happy to work with you once you've got your products released to figure out how to add OpenC2 to it. That would be great.
I'm all for it. So sounds like we got a plan to hack something together during this hackathon.
Ooh, there's a thought.
I know, novel idea. But no, Jane, thank you for making.
Hey, we've carved out some time at the end of the Interoperability Plug Fest that Friday afternoon. So we carved out an hour or two for us. Any folks want to get together and do some ad hoc next steps collaboration, there will be time for those of us that'll still be in the Washington area. So that might be a good opportunity for us to compare notes, because I'm very interested as well as building some of this stuff. Hopefully in our interoperability village, right, where we can all partake. But definitely interested in the conversation, John.
Perfect. All right then. So if there are no other topics, then I will thank everybody and I will stop the recording, but I'll pause for a moment just to make sure, because I'm not trying to cut anybody off. All right, with that, I'm going to stop the recording and thank you all.